Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the QSP Lark, a very compact and very utilitarian EDC folding knife that is well in the budget territory. This knife is available right now in a few different configurations, including gray, black, and green G10. Like I said, not expensive. I will link it right down below so you guys can check it out if you want to. It does help my channel when you use those links, but that's entirely up to you. Thanks so much to QSP for sending this knife to me for review. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me, and please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. Let's go ahead and get a measurement of this knife. Not a huge knife, but also not a small knife either. Overall length of the Lark coming in at just shy of 7.5 inches. It's about 7.35, maybe 7.4. Cutting edge, let's do blade length. That's 3 1/8 to the middle of the scale. Cutting edge is coming in at about 3 1/16. How about some size comparisons? Any custom skills you can find down in the description under Original Goat, like on this 8010, or Flytanium. How about also up against the Demco 8020.5? This is much closer to the overall length of the 8020.5, just slightly shorter. How about up against the Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3? There we go. And last but not least, let's put it up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue, and the Benchmade Bug Out. How's the action on this knife? QSP does a great job with budget cutlery. They do a good job with premium cutlery as well, but everything just feels exceptionally good. As I missed that front flip, everything just feels exceptionally good, very tight, very paid attention to, right? QSP has always done a good job of this, and this knife is no exception. What we have here is a liner lock, which this is cut slightly above, and it's really just the jimping. It's not so aggressive that it's bothersome. You can get in there, right? It's just enough to make that work. But getting this knife to clear that little area right here, which is not a flipper tab, and then have your finger land in the sharpening choil, it's just not gonna happen. So if you need to brace before, like the safest way to do this, right here, this is kind of a double clutch situation, because about right there, the ball's not quite up on the face of the blade. But if you let it pass, there's not enough weight in the blade to where even if it does come down on your fingernail, it's probably not gonna do anything, right? That's only for people who like to disengage like this. Doing this over and over again, you can feel the sort of teeth of the jimping here, right? This is very nitpicky, but for the most part, you know, truthfully, the easiest way I found is just kind of making good with both situations here and just keeping an index finger on the back of the blade, releasing the liner lock, and then closing it like this, right? The rear flipper tab, you have to light switch, because if you try to push button it, that front flipper is going to come around and get stuck on the tip of your index finger, keeping the blade from locking out. So if you light switch it, it's good. The detemp feels good. And then if you also want a front flipper, that also feels good. I've always maintained that it has to be a pretty excellent front flipper for that to be the only means of deployment. Most of the time, I like front flippers in combination with other things, like a rear flipper or thumb stud, thumb hole, something like that. And that's what we've got here. We've got a very unobtrusive rear flipper, and then we also have a front flipper, and they both work really well. Liner lock disengagement is okay. A little bit of a double clutch situation depending on where you put your finger, but for the most part, extremely easy to manipulate, and good bearing action on the inside too. Let's go ahead and do carry profile. Thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. It is about the same, honestly. Length and height up against the PM2 and Para 3. This is where the knife is going to be easier than most to carry, because it's really just kind of a long, rounded off rectangle. It's actually about exactly the same as the Para 3, nowhere near as tall, and obviously much smaller than the PM2. Materials, what we have here is peel ply textured G10, just flat, not contoured. We have nested milled steel liners and 14C28N for the blade, which is great. 14C28N is definitely one of the best steels that you can get in this territory. Let's go ahead and weigh it. Excuse me. Weight on the Lark is 3.21 ounces, which is almost a 1-to-1 ratio when we consider blade length. 3.2 ounces for, 3.1 inches of, what did I measure the blade at? Just like 3 1/16. It's very close. I mean, the balance on the knife is good, and the overall, the knife in general, actually the balance is quite a ways back, but the overall knife is so compact and such a simple shape that you're really, the only thing you're going to notice is that it's just easy to carry around, and that's just factually true. It's just going to be easy to carry around. Let's go ahead and get let's do a hardware check. I'll get out my tools as per usual. My tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use on this channel. The pivot is almost certainly a T8. Yep, that's the case. And then the screws, actually, we're going to have other screws underneath here going into the standoffs. So you're going to have probably 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then we have 2 additional screws holding in the filler tab on one side and 2 additional screws holding in the pocket clip. The screws underneath are likely T6. So the total, I mean, as far as like integrity screws, there's 4. And then there's technically 4 clip screws, right? Which is fine. It's not really that big of a deal. You have to use T6. Can't always get what you want. Should be very easy to disassemble and maintain as long as you have the right tools for the job. And I would suggest a place to put your hardware. Let's go ahead and measure blade stock thickness real quick. I'm going to guess that's about 115 to 120 thousandths. Probably 115. That's what I'm going with there. So measuring back here, I am just laser accurate. 115 thousandths there. Let's go ahead and move into the meat and potatoes here. This is a very straightforward knife. It is certainly a profile that has been done before. These are the types of profiles that always lead people to say, that's a copy of the, that's a copy of that. No, it isn't. It's just very traditional knife lines. There are tons. If you can think of one knife this looks like, there are 1,000 more, I promise you. It's just a really, really simple knife design, but it works. You have flat scales. G10 texturing is not aggressive. I would say this is even lighter than what I'd call medium texturing, and the edges are nicely knocked down. As far as, ergonomics go, they're okay. It's about what you'd expect from something that's just a long, straight rectangle or oval, essentially, right? The edges are knocked down enough that this is as comfortable as you would need it to be. This is not a knife that I would take out and use hard. This is more of just like a generic daily carry knife that you would use for simple things here and there, office carry knife, something like that, and it'll work for that. It's going to do exactly that. This does, obviously we don't need this to be able to baton, redwood tree stumps or anything. It's not the right thing for that. So who cares? But as far as the grip that you'll need for this knife when you're doing very simple tasks, it is definitely good enough. There's a little bit of jimping back here. I think it would have been nice to extend a little bit further just in case you're doing something delicate or you're trying to make some sort of precision whittle cut or something. I don't really know. But yeah, that would have been nice, but okay, whatever. The blade is fully flat ground and is definitely slicey. That was the first thing that I noticed right before I started the review process. Was after I unboxed it, I cut some paper and wow, it is ready to go. And that's no surprise there. It's a fairly aggressive taper down to the cutting edge. It's not thick to begin with, and QSP does a great job with the factory edge. So yeah, it's gonna be nice and slicey. This is a very, very utilitarian blade shape, and you didn't need me to tell you that. You could probably pick that up just from looking at it, right? It's got a nice tip, a little bit of belly. It's good to go. This is not a, not the typical machine satin finish that we see where the belt lines are vertical. These are horizontal. Now that doesn't mean it's hand done. It's likely just whatever automated process they've come up with to have the lines go this way. And it looks good. It's pretty uniform. It's not completely uniform. It seems like there's a little bit of curvature there or a little bit of, it's not perfectly straight, but it looks good enough. QSP still did a good enough job with it. I think what I really appreciate is that there's absolutely nothing on the blade on either side. It's just totally clean, right? Or they call it sterile, I guess. 14C28N is down here, and the QSP logo is confined to the pivot. So that's fine. It looks good. I don't mind the filler tab look on this. I don't know that I would care if it was there or they just left the slot open. A lot of people say, then debris can get in there. Who cares? It's just a weird thing to find. I just don't care that there's a filler tab there. It just makes such little difference to me, right? But the fact that it's there is fine. Really, what's more important is that lefties have a place to mount the pocket clip for the optimal carry position, right? They're not forced to put it in their right-hand pocket or leave the pocket clip on this side and put it in their left-hand pocket, which is unsafe. Because then, if it gets bumped and the blade opens up in your pocket, well, guess what? You're going to reach in and you're going to shake hands with the tip of the blade. So, yeah, So that's good. We got a lefty mounting position. We got a couple of standoffs back here. Like I said, the steel liners are nested and they go all the way down, which is something that I like. There's a lanyard hole there, so that's fine. Pocket clip is deep carry. QSP really knows how to do a good clip. There's a little bit of a bill, but not much, and it's a swoop at the end, and it's also rounded. The clip itself is nested into the G10, and the fasteners or the screws are recessed into the clip, which is great. So in and out of the pocket, the only drag, the only issue you're going to experience is some light texturing, which will create a little bit of friction in and out of the pocket, and over a long period of time, it will fray up your pants. But listen, if you're watching this right now, look down at your pocket. It's already frayed up. I mean, let's be real. Like that's sort of, par for the course, right? Let's see here. There is a stop pin, and it is actually internal. I didn't realize this initially. It's actually attached to the blade, running on channels on either side of the steel liner. So that's nice. You get one extra point of contact versus a traditional stop pin that's just located like in the back right there. So that's fine. Not that you need that extra stability with a knife like this, because really, come on, what are you going to be doing with it? You're just going to be cutting with it. But it's fine. It's hidden in there and it works just well enough. I think one of the benefits of having a stop pin set up like that is great lockout solidity. No movement, right? Because it's stabilized on two sides. Like the contact points, there's one extra contact point and it's widened out versus regular stop pin. So you can get pretty good action while still having really good lockout solidity, right? There's obviously many other variables there. Fortunately, QSP has great tolerances and they pay attention to stuff like this, so it's just generally speaking good to go. No blade play up, down, left to right, no lock stick, no pivot lash. Very smooth and consistent in here. Exactly the right detent for this setup and this size of knife. And we have pretty darn perfect centering. If it is off, it's slightly to the right, and that can most likely be fixed by turning the pivot just a little bit. I probably caused that to happen during this review. I have tightened this pivot down once, and it looks like it might be drifting again. That's pretty normal. If you're like, oh no, these new knives suck because they come off centered so quickly. That's pretty much any knife that doesn't already have Loctite on it. I would prefer that they didn't send it Loctited from the factory. That way, if it's got an issue, it's just that much easier to fix. So don't send your knives back because they're off center. Try tightening the pivot or tightening the body screws in combination with the pivot. Get it set where you want and put some blue 242 Loctite on it. Let it set for 24 hours in the place where oxygen is much less likely to get to it, right? And it should be fine for a very, very long time. The off-center blade is usually not that big of a deal. Like I said, I am almost certain that this knife came centered from the factory, and just me playing with it has caused me to have to, tighten it back down. So no big deal. At the end of the day, this is a $57 knife. A couple of little minor things, but all in all, it's a decent EDC knife for a pretty good price. You get QSP quality there. I really don't have an issue with it. There's nothing absolutely spectacular about the design, nothing that makes it stand out, amidst other budget knives. It's just a good, straightforward, option. And the price is good enough to say, yeah, it's recommendable. It's also a cheap knife I like because it's under 75 bucks. So if you have been curious about front flippers, this is one of those knives where it's like, if you're curious about a front flipper, but you don't want to dedicate to it, this is a good option because it still has a regular flipper. And then you can practice with the front flipper and kind of decide whether or not it's going to be for you. But either way, it's going to be a good, lightweight, compact EDC knife with a very, very utilitarian blade shape, and it's also made out of great materials. So that's pretty much it, guys. Definitely a nice knife here, the QSP Lark. Like I said, I'll have it linked right down in the description. You guys can check it out if you want. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.